What's up, booktube? Welcome back. My name is Laura if you're new here, and today I'm going over some quick reads to help get you out of a reading slump. So reading slumps are something that I struggle with a lot. I get into them all the time. Pretty much anytime I finish reading either a really good book or a really bad book. And I just end up in a reading slump. I'll be in a reading kick and then all of a sudden I just can't pick what to read, or I'll get into moods where like I want to read everything at once and then I can't pick one, and so I end up reading nothing. That happens to me literally all the time and it's so annoying. So I have some tips and tricks for how to get out of reading slumps using different kinds of books, different genres, stuff like that. So I thought that I would go over some of those tips and tricks for you guys, since I'm sure we all deal with reading slumps from time to time. So I have these broken up into like different genres and like types of books. So I'm just going to get right into it, starting with the one that if you watch my channel, I'm sure you know that these are coming, but I'm going to start with the Waiver children's series by McGuire. Novellas are an amazing way to get out of reading slumps because they're super short. So for this series, I would recommend reading either the first book, Every Heart a Doorway, the fourth book, In an Absent Dream, or the sixth book, Across the Green Grass Field, because these two can be read as standalones and this one is the first in the series. Other three books, you have to have read this book to be able to read those ones. These two, you can just go into them knowing nothing about the series, but these are super short and they're really fun and they're like very low stakes. There's not too much going on with them, but they're just these beautiful worlds, and again, they're just really fun. So I love these books for getting out of reading slumps. This series takes place in a world where children who are unhappy in their lives end up finding doors sometimes that take them to the place where they're meant to be, and they end up being happy there, but for some reason they end up having to come back to our world. Now they are unhappy and they have to learn how to cope and hopefully wait for the door to open again to take them back home. So each book takes us to a different world that we get to explore, and they're just so wonderful. I love them dearly. I absolutely adore these books. We all know this. I talk about them constantly. But they are also fantastic for reading slump moods. So I recommend these ones. For other novellas, I would recommend A Dead Jane in Cairo and The Haunting of Tramcar 015 by Djeli Clark. I've only read The Haunting of Tramcar 015 so far, but it was fantastic, and they're both super short as well. I believe A Dead Jane in Cairo is like 65 pages or so, and then The Haunting of Tramcar 015 is like 130 maybe, so they're super short, but they are super quick reads. Again, low stakes. It has a beautiful imaginative world, but the plot is really simple, so it's not hard to grasp, and it's just like a really entertaining read. The Haunting of Tramcar 015 follows two agents who work for the Department of Magical stuff, basically. I forget what it's called, but they go around dealing with like hauntings and issues with like jinn and stuff like that, because in this world it's just well known that magic is real. So it's a really cool world. I really want to get to A Dead Jane in Cairo, but I haven't read it, so I'm not sure what it's about. But The Haunting of Tramcar 015 was so much fun, and again, being so short and like pretty simple in terms of the plot, they are fantastic for reading slumps. And the last of the novellas that I have to recommend is the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. I have not talked about this series in so long because I was so obsessed with it when I first started my channel last year, and I would talk about the series literally all the time, so I tried not to talk about them for a while, but here we are again. I couldn't resist. These are sci-fi books set like way in the future about a AI security robot who has hacked his own system. So he's pretty much sentient. He says he doesn't have feelings, but he totally does. And basically he just doesn't want to do his job. All he wants to do is just be left alone for all of eternity and just watch his soap operas and read books and listen to music, and he just wants to be left alone. But the humans around him are always getting into trouble, so he is constantly having to come to their rescue, and he says he hates it, but he definitely has a soft spot for them. And it's just this really like fun, lighthearted series. It's sci-fi, but it's not hard sci-fi, so it's not difficult to grasp, and they're just really entertaining. They are hilarious. I've read all these books on audiobook, and I definitely recommend it because the style of writing for these books, it's basically like you're reading the diary of this murder bot, and he'll refer to you as though he's talking to you, so he's just like telling you about his day. So having the audiobook, it just sounds like a pal talking to you about you know, the bullshit that he's dealing with at work. They're so fun. I haven't read the newest like full-length novel that came out last year yet, but like I'm dying to get to it. I also really like reading comics when I'm in a reading slump. They're very quick, they're easy to read, and for me what really helps to get out of a reading slump is just like be able to finish a book in like one sitting. So even though it's a comic and I can, you know, read it in like less than an hour, I still feel accomplished when I'm like, I just read a whole book in one sitting. Some of the ones that I have to recommend are Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker. This is a super cute little like Halloween comic. You can read it anytime, but it takes place during the fall, and it's about a witch and a non-binary werewolf who were childhood crushes, and they reconnect later in life, and they fall back in love and also have to battle a demon together. It is absolutely adorable, very low stakes. Like the plot is really not that well developed, but like I didn't mind that. It was more just about the characters and just like enjoying this cute little romance. So like don't go into this expecting it to be a like amazing story, but just the characters are so cute and the art is gorgeous. So it's really more just about the experience of reading it and just like having a good time rather than being about the plot. But it was so cute and I loved this one so much. I would also recommend The Prince and the Dressmaker by Wang. This one was so cute. I loved this book so much. I read it in one sitting. This one is about a prince and a dressmaker. The prince hires this dressmaker in secret to make him beautiful ball gowns so that he can go out dressed as a woman, and the two like slowly fall in love, and it was really cute. This was a like very simple but like not simple at the same time, because it like talks about a pretty heavy topic of like being outed and stuff like that, but it was still very light and fun and just easy to read and just really entertaining and cute. So like kind of an interesting dynamic there, but like it was done so well and I just really enjoyed it. So I would definitely recommend if you're feeling kind of slumpy. And then I also have a anthology on this list. I find anthologies are fantastic for reading slumps because each story is only about 50 pages or so they're not very long, so it feels less intimidating when like you know that you're going into this book but you only have to like pay attention to one story for a couple of pages pretty much. So they're easier to digest and way easier to just like be able to fly through. So I would recommend 1,000 Beginnings and Endings by Ellen O and Elsie Chapman. This is beautiful. First of all, like look at this cover. It is gorgeous. I love it. But this one is a series of short stories all inspired by different myths and legends from various different Asian cultures. So this was stunning. They have stories from all over Asia. All of them were so beautiful. Normally for anthologies, there's usually like one or two stories that like I didn't like nearly as much as everything else. But in this one, there was not one story that I didn't like. There were definitely some that were like weaker than others, but they were still all like at least 4.5 stars, if not 5 stars each, which is incredible. That literally never happens, but this one just blew me out of the water. It was incredible. So definitely recommend this one as well. I've recently gotten into romance as a genre as well, mostly when I'm in a reading slump or I just need something that's like easy, because I read mostly fantasy. World building can sometimes be like too much for my brain to grasp sometimes, so I find reading contemporary and reading romance specifically can be really helpful with that, because with a romance like you know the formula, like there is a set formula that all romance follow, so there's really no surprises, which sounds like it can be kind of repetitive, but like it's really fun and like just a quick easy read, and knowing beforehand like where things are going to go, it just like takes away some of the brain power, you know, so it makes it a lot easier to read. So for romance books, I have 2 recommendations. The first one being The Unhoneymooners by Christina. I fucking loved this book. It was hilarious. This is probably the funniest romance that I've read ever. It was hysterical. This is a enemies to lovers where there are 2 people getting married, and the sister of the bride and the brother of the groom, they hate each other, but at the wedding everybody but those 2 end up getting food poisoning, but the bride and groom don't want their honeymoon to go to waste, so the 2 main characters end up having to go together despite like literally hating each other, but because it is a honeymoon retreat that they won for free, they have to pretend to be the couple. So they have to go and pretend to be madly in love and just married, and to make things even more complicated, the new boss of the female lead ends up being there, as well as the ex-girlfriend of the male lead. So they are in some major trouble. The banter in this one was incredible. It was just hysterical. Like just pick it up. If you're in a bad mood, just read this book because it was so funny. And then I would also recommend Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. I do actually like the first book a little bit better than the second one, but I do find that Take a Hint, Dani Brown is a bit more lighthearted. The first book deals a lot with like chronic pain and like heavier topics, whereas the second one is like a lot more like lighthearted and goofy. So that's why I would recommend this one over the first one, but like both are amazing, so like read either of them honestly. I kind of forget what this one's about right now. I think it was a fake dating trope. I might be wrong, but like it was great. So just, that was a terrible synopsis, but just take my word for it and go read it. Alright, so for my fantasy readers, I would recommend reading An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This is a fantasy romance, so it's set in a fantasy world, but the main plot is the romance. So this one takes place in a fairy world where the fairies, they're not able to do any kind of artistic things, so they can't cook, they can't paint, they can't do anything, they can't make music. So they hire the humans to do these things for them, and our main character in this book is like the best painter. So she gets hired to paint the portrait of, I believe, the Autumn Prince, and she makes the mistake of painting human sorrow in his eyes, so he has to come take her to their court to explain that it was a mistake before he loses his throne. And of course they fall in love along the way. So this one was a super quick read. I read it in like one sitting. It's pretty short as well, and but just like the way that it's written, it just flies by. It was so good. I love the writing style. There is still a plot outside of the romance, but it's not really like the main focus. So it's really just a really cute romance set in this beautiful fantasy world, and I adored it. So I would definitely recommend this one to get out of a reading slump if you like fantasy. And then the last two things that I would recommend are both nonfiction. One is poetry, one is a memoir. So I like memoirs to get out of a reading slump because I find reading about somebody's life to be really interesting, first of all, but again, like not being like part of a fantasy world is just easier to grasp. I would recommend A Work in Progress by Franta. I picked this one because he does include a lot of his like photos in it as well. So the whole book isn't like just text, it's broken up with photos, so it like flies by. It was really easy to read and just really entertaining, and I just really enjoy Franta's writing and his photos, so it was a really beautiful book to read. And then for my poetry book, I would recommend The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. There is a whole lot of poetry out there, so like really any poetry collection would be great for a reading slump, but I just happen to have this one on hand. But yeah, like really any poetry is great because like super short, very easy to get through. It's just like little snippets of pretty wise words. There's no like consistent plot that you have to follow over hundreds of pages, so it's like less brain power. I love poetry. I have a hard time rating it, but I do really enjoy reading it. But yeah, really good. So yeah, those are my top recommendations for genres and different types of books to get out of a reading slump. Again, I deal with this so often. I'm kind of in one right now a little bit, so this is great timing. Maybe I'll take my own advice. But yeah, that should do it for today's video. Let me know what kind of books you read when you want to get out of a reading slump. I would love to know that. I'm always looking for more tips and tricks. But in the meantime, that'll do it for today. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!